Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank you for participating in the class today online. Unfortunately, we have a number of security measures in place to accommodate the growing concern for the coronavirus. So for this week and next week, certainly, and with a high degree of probability, we may finish this semester online in this format. So the good thing is the majority of, or in this, after we record this lecture, the entirety of your course materials, required documents, are already posted online. So we're a little bit ahead of the curve as far as that goes. And once the lectures are up and available, you guys can attend class online. And simply, I'll have some kind of report in protocol embedded into web courses so I can track who has looked at the lectures and so forth to make sure that everybody's getting the content. Now, one thing that came up in a meeting this afternoon that I would like to mention to everyone is if you happen to be one of the individuals that, because of this quarantine or sequester, however you want to think about it, if you don't have adequate access to online services, whether you're at home or if you are quarantined in your dorm room and you don't have adequate online services, you need to get in touch with me right away and let me know of your challenge. Because if we go strictly to an online mode for the rest of the semester and you don't have adequate utility at your disposal, that's going to hinder your ability to participate in class. So I want to make sure that there's nobody out there that is working at a deficit at this point. If you don't have adequate internet, please let me know so that we can figure out some kind of alternate means for you to participate in the remainder of the course. And if we can't find some kind of workable solution for you, it has been presented, although it is not by any means policy yet at this point, but it has been suggested that if we do have any individuals who don't have access to effective internet service, that we may have to issue some incompletes for Cinematography 1. So I hope it doesn't come to that with anybody in this class. So let's determine that as quickly as possible to make sure that we don't have anybody left behind in this rapid transition that we're doing here. Let me just say that today I want to try and cover as effectively as I can the second portion of the framing and composition discussion that we had the week before the break. But before I do that, I want to, as always, I want to swap over to my web courses tool here and just show you really quick. The section that we're going to discuss today is 5.1. It's shot lists and shot types. Look for this artwork on web courses so you know you're in the right place. And then your material that you're going to need will all be loaded here. I will create an activity in the module for 5.1 week 10, and it will be called Video Lecture. And you can go to that tab directly and watch this video and get the essence of the lecture in this fashion. And then, of course, as usual, I will put the PDF version of the decks, the presentation that I'm using here, also on web courses so that you'll be able to take a closer examination of any one of these cells that you want to go back and refresh your memory on or read more thoroughly, whatever. So that content will be available to you as well as always. So we're going to talk about coverage today a little bit. Your reading assignment is posted here, so you got a little bit to look at in the Brown book, and this is from the 3rd edition, so it's the blue version of the Brown book, right? The blue-brown book. And we're going to look at the chapter called Writing with Motion and Coverage and Continuity, okay? So those, your reading assignments will come from those 2 chapters. I've got an interesting link here to Hollywood Camerawork. This is, if I can show you really quick, let me just open that in a new tab. Hollywood Camerawork is a really great piece of software. You can download it for Apple or for Mac. I used to have a version of it loaded into my laptop. I have a new laptop now, so I have to go ahead and install a new version. But there's a free download here, and you can access their program. You can use the application called Shot Designer, and you can create lighting plots or camera plots using their rudimentary bird's eye view sort of software. And it's really neat when you're making lighting diagrams and stuff. You can create documents that will help you disseminate the information amongst your crew and so forth when you're doing a production. For instance, a lighting plot is handy to be able to give to your gaffer so they know where to put the lights when you're getting ready for the afternoon of shooting. And you can pass on information in document form that way. So Hollywood Shot Designer, it's under the Hollywood Camerawork moniker online. It is available for you to download here in either one of the laptop formats that you're using. And I recommend it as long as you access it as a sample or as a visitor, a guest to the website. You can use the app for free. It just won't allow you to save any documents in Hollywood Shot Designer. But what my students usually do is they'll use the grab function. For instance, I got grab loaded into my toolbar, and I just go in and I use the grab function to lasso the artwork that I've created and take a snippet of it, and then it'll save it to your laptop as a PNG. So you can work with the software that way. It's pretty handy, and I think you'll find it very useful moving forward. The downloadable PDFs are all here. So there's a coverage PDF that's been created for you for this course. There is, I've got an article here from Microfilmmaker Magazine for you to check out. I've got a little PDF on the Dutch angle specifically, which will be part of one of the presentations I show you today. And then there's a video production shot list GIF for you to check out really quickly. So the concept that I want to talk to you about today is going to take the aspects of composition and framing that I talked to you guys about last week, and we're going to start to use those guidelines and sensibilities when we start creating pieces for the edit. So in other words, as a cinematographer, I'm going to be on set and I'm going to be looking at shots in terms of not just whether it's appealing compositionally and lit well and so forth, but shot for shot, as I think about this as a sequence, how do each of these shots relate to one another, and would they create an effective edit dramatically for the finished product? So that's kind of what I want to start talking with you about today. This is the kind of conversation that we have a lot towards the end of this course this semester, and also in cinematography too, because once you get into the lab and we start working with shots and shooting things for demonstration and as you start shooting for your projects, it'll be important for you to get a sense of the kinds of shots you need to gather in order to create a nice dramatic piece that will have flow throughout the visual as you go from shot to shot within a scene. And hopefully those choices will support the script and the dialogue and performance that are happening in front of the camera. And the whole thing kind of comes together as a nice, cohesive, dramatic piece. So we're going to talk about that today. As usual, the videos that are part of the lecture are here for you to watch at your leisure. So as I discuss them in in the lecture presentation, rather than play them here on the monitor, I think what I'll do is I'll just have a pause, and you can access those videos from web courses. And then under each video, there should also be a link if you wanted to go directly to the website that I pulled the video from. I believe the links in the PDF are all active. If they're not, let me know. But they are also, the ones that I want you to be responsible for are actually embedded in web courses. So if you go to section, I believe this is 5.1. Yeah, if you go to 5.1 on your home page and access this material, you'll find all those videos loaded here. Okay, so this is how I want to proceed moving forward, at least for the next 2 to 3 weeks. And hopefully you find this at least mostly effective as coming to class. Hopefully there'll be very little discomfort and an ease in transition between coming to Nicholson School and simply going online. Here is your upcoming schedule still. So you folks had quiz 4 before the break. Your next quiz will be coming up on the 30th at the end of this month. So that's still a couple of weeks away yet. But I want to just point that out to you and make you aware of it so that it's on your radar at this point. Okay, and that'll only leave one quiz remaining, and then your final exam, which will, at this point, is still scheduled for the 27th of April. So barring the unforeseen, as we move forward through this crisis, hopefully that date won't change. If it does, I'll let you know and I'll send out an announcement. Okay, so let me now toggle back to the presentation. So this is shot design and coverage. This is section 5.1. And we are in cinematography 1 spring semester. So I just talked about your upcoming schedule. Here's something that I haven't pointed out to you folks yet. I like to put little PSAs in the beginning of each of my lectures just so you have some awareness of events or things that are available to you on the outside. This is the Digital Cinema Society. This is a group of folks that were under the leadership of James Mathers out in Los Angeles. They started up about 8 or 9 years ago, I guess, and they meet monthly out in Los Angeles, and I hosted a number of their meetings at a studio that I was managing at one point in time. But you can also join them online, and they put up a lot of videos and so forth. There's a couple of introductory videos here. Their website is posted down here, digitalcinemasociety.org. You can go to their website, check out their content. You can also become a student member. I think there is an annual fee. I don't remember, excuse me, off the top of my head what the annual subscription rate was, but it's pretty marginal, and you get access to some great industry professionals who are working and interacting out in the business out in Los Angeles, and you can effectively become part of that community even though you're still here in Orlando. And who knows what kind of connections that you can make through a group like this. But you can see that they have some pretty heavy-duty sponsorships. So they've got a sponsorship by Zeiss, Roscoe, the gel manufacturer. This is Avid, Band Pro, which is a large commercial vendor and rental facility out in Los Angeles. Kino Flow, which you folks will be familiar with. And then, of course, they've got advertisements for Cine Gear and so forth. FYI, in case you folks weren't aware, I just got word of this, I think it was yesterday morning, that the National Association of Broadcasters, which has a huge convention every year out in Las Vegas, that convention has been canceled this year due to the coronavirus concern. So this is a real thing. It's not, we're not being hyper proactive about this. There are some legitimate concerns about everybody's safety and about the veracity of this this epidemic. So events like NAB, which is a massive, massive event that happens every year. Economically, it's a monster. They usually have, over 100,000 people attend annually to this event, and usually it usually coincides around the same time as tax time every year, around first week of April, something like that, end of March, first week of April, and thousands of people go. It generates hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue for vendors and for the city of Las Vegas and for the convention center and so forth. All of that was canceled this year, so this is a big deal. So I just wanted you guys to be aware of that. What else have I got here for you? I think that's it for now. So the concept today, or the concept I want you to have in your mind as we go through this discussion, is shooting coverage, okay? So coverage are all the shots that you're going to gather of a scene as the scene unfolds, right? Master shots, two shots, wide shots, close shots, inserts, singles, two shots, over-the-shoulder shots, all of those different shots that you're going to gather so that as the director and the editor sit in post-production and they're trying to decide the best way for the dialogue to flow and for the performance to flow, they have a number of different points of view of the action that can be chosen from to create the final edit, which gives you the final dramatic performance effect. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And this is a concept that carries forward into cinematography too. So I don't want to get too deep in the weeds with these concepts here today. I just want to sort of whet your appetite, give you a few of the terms, talk about the basic ideas behind it. And then this is a conversation that will be ongoing throughout your education at this point. You probably had a sampling of this conversation already if you're taking the Intro to Editing classes here at UCF. If this is the first time you're hearing it, that's okay. It won't be the last time. So just sit back and let it sink in. Give it some time to marinate, take effect. And as always, if any of you have any questions about the concepts, the things that I'm discussing here today, you can reach out to me via email and pose your questions to me in that format, and I will get back to you as soon as I possibly can, okay? So let's move forward here. I'm going to talk to you today about shot types. These are the building blocks of our visual language. Shooting for the edit, which is the concept that I refer to when you're gathering shots with the idea of how they will cut together in the final product. Framing and composition in terms of the 180 degree or the proscenium rule. I also want to talk to you about objective versus subjective camera angles. We'll talk to you about some unusual camera angles that can enhance your story. And then we'll talk about putting all the elements together, and then a couple of brief discussions about the master shot as a oneer, we call it, and then shots with emphasis and meaning behind the framing, okay? So to start this discussion off, I want to talk to you about the idea of shot, sequence, and scene, okay? So editors are going to have one way of looking at this gathering of the content, and then the shooters, the folks that are working in the physical production aspect of this whole thing, might have a slightly different take on what these pieces are called. Okay, so I like to think about this and break it down in this way. So we have a series of shots that we're going to take of a scene, whatever that scene is, okay? Whether it's a car chase or a conversation at a dinner table or a walk and talk, whatever it is, it starts off as a series of shots that might then be combined into sequences of shots, which will then be combined ultimately to form a scene, okay? So it breaks down as a series of shots, subsets of sequences, and finally into a scene, okay? And then of course you can have sequences that consist of numbers of scenes as well, okay? And that's what I mean by sort of extrapolating this conversation into the realm of the editor, okay? But for the content gatherers and the shot makers, we're looking for shots, sequences of shots that comprise a scene. Okay, So the shot's the image that represents the idea or the part of an idea, and the shot uses elements of composition, framing, and so forth to communicate non-verbally. Okay, so this whole course has been stressing the non-verbal communication aspects of cinema, and it's all going to sort of come to a culmination here in this discussion. The shot is the smallest increment of the visual storytelling structure. Okay, then we have the sequence, and so I said a sequence can be a series of shots or it can be a series of scenes. Okay, in this context, I'm going to refer to a sequence as a series of shots that are grouped together that represent one idea, like car chase from, say, The Bourne Identity, right? So there's a scene where he gets in the car with Franca and convinces her to give him a ride, right? So that he doesn't get picked up by the I don't know if it's the Stasi or just the German police at that point. But he is being pursued by somebody, and he needs a lift. So he hops in a random car. This girl is in the car. They have a quick discussion, and then it evolves into a car chase. Right? He coaxes her to get him out of there, and then it leads into a car chase. So that scene is this whole thing, right? Evolving into a car chase. The first sequence is Jason hops into the car and convinces Franca that he needs a ride, and she accepts his transaction, right? He offers her money. Okay, and then there's the sequence of the actual physical car chase, and then there might be at the end of it some semblance of a getaway, right? Okay, so the whole thing might be the same scene, or it might be a sequence of scenes that lead one into the other. And then what we're doing is just assembling all those parts into a convincing narrative at the end. One good way to think about this is through storyboarding. This is some stuff from Iron Man, it looks like, at some point. I have some review material in section 5.1 about shot lists and storyboards. Some of you might recognize that content from my Introduction to Production class. Okay, if you haven't seen that content before, it's available for you on web courses. Okay. Okay, what do we got here? Okay, so the building blocks of our visual language. Okay, so this is a basic shot list. This is one version of a shot list. Okay, you'll notice all down one side we have the script reference. Okay. We have the shot number on the day. Okay, so on this particular day, there's 9 shots that they need to create. And it looks like these are scene numbers for reference. Then we have the interior or exterior designation. We have the style of the shot, whether it's a wide shot, a medium close-up, or a medium shot. And then we have the camera angle. So we have eye level, high eye level, high angle, bird's eye view, over the shoulder, and so forth. And I'm going to talk about all those sizes here in a few minutes, so just bear with me. Then we have whether or not we need audio or whether there's VO. In this case, it looks like it's all VO. The camera movement is all static with the exception of a couple of pans. And then in this column, we see what characters are involved in each one of these shots and a brief description of what's happening in the shot. So this is a fairly comprehensive shot list. This is the kind of thing that a director or cinematographer might do in pre-production. A lot of times, the director and the cinematographer will work on shot lists together in pre-production. It's a lot easier when you got 2 folks in a room on payroll that can sort of visualize the movie in advance, right? It's very expensive to get everybody on the crew to show up at a location, have all the gear and equipment there, be on the location. The location is on payroll now. Have the lights and the generators and the actors and everybody there, and then start trying to figure out how this whole thing's going to piece together. That would be a tremendous, tremendous waste of time and waste of money. And the studios are looking for every possible way to control and contain the spending on a feature production. So one of the things that we can do in this process, to make it a little bit more cost effective, is for the DP and the director to get together in pre-production and think about these scenes. You go through the entire script scene by scene and start thinking about the shots and how that might look on camera. A lot of times, we'll bring in a storyboard artist, and that storyboard artist will just sort of sit there and listen to the spitballing. And when we want to see a panel, we'll ask if they can, produce the panel of the two shot we were just talking about, or produce the panel of the master shot we were just discussing. And that storyboard artist will have a TBD list, we call it, to be done, a menu of shots that they need to create, and they might start sketching and doing some roughs right there in the meeting to get a sense, of the point of view, the angle, the angle of view, and then they'll go back and they'll flesh those cells in to include a little bit more detail to give us a sense of how a scene's going to unfold shot-wise. And then we'll look at that sequence of panels from the storyboard artist, and we can agree or we can disagree, and then we can re-engineer whatever shots we think don't quite work well, and have a sense of a scene, in front of us in black and white in a series of sketches. And then it's a simple matter when you get to principal photography and you get to that day when you have to produce that scene, to go back and reference your storyboards. And if you've made effective notes and everything, you might already know what lenses you want to be on, what camera support you want to be using for a particular shot. And all of that will be based on this kind of research and referencing that you did early on in pre-production, when it was just a couple of guys in a room and the whole crew hadn't maybe even been hired yet. We're going to do this in the process. We're going to break down a script, okay? And it looks like here I've got a nice little video that you guys can check out, and it'll be on web courses. This is about how to break down a script, but basically this is what I'm talking about. So you take a page out of your working script, and it might already have scene numbers placed on it. The ADs might have already broken this down in terms of scene numbers and day or night, interior or exterior, and so forth. But if not, it's okay. All you have to do is look for the slug lines, interior or exterior, that are part of the script, and then look for the dialogue. And then just, if you read the action, the descriptions, you can figure out from the scriptwriter's point of view how they feel like the scene is going to start to open up and unfold. And then you have the dialogue, and then you just start creating a series of lines over this particular scene. Now it looks like they're calling this scene 4, I can see from the notes. Okay, so if this is all scene 4, the largest lines that you might see here will be probably the master coverage. This is a line that continues from the top of the page and it passes through at the bottom of the page. And some of you might remember that we break a script page up into eighths. Okay, so this line is clearly going all the way through the entire page and then carries on to the next page. This might be a master shot or a submaster shot. It's the longest one, okay? You'll see that there's a squiggly line on this shot line here, and each one of these squiggly lines corresponds to a piece of dialogue by this character, Mary, right here, okay? So the squiggly line is showing you that in this case, in this particular shot, whatever it is, and I can't see the notes at the top of the page to tell you for sure, but whatever this shot is, it doesn't include Mary on camera with her dialogue, okay? She's excluded from this shot in these two places. And if we look hard enough, we'll find a shot that does include Mary, and it's right here. It's called, what are they calling this? 3 apple, and the rest of these are marked 4. So I'm assuming that that's a typo and that they really meant 4 apple, okay? So if this was scene 4 master, the first piece of coverage, 4 apple, was actually Mary in some version, and the framing is not indicated here. You can do this on margin notes. You can indicate what framing you want for apple, or in this case, you might merely be figuring out what piece of coverage you want to do first. For instance, we can take a couple of different protocols when we start. Once we get a master shot and we have to decide who do we want to start shooting first if it's a conversation between two people, we can assume a couple of obvious protocols. We can go ladies before gentlemen. If it's a man and a woman talking and you want to do ladies first and then gentlemen after that, that's fine. You could go with the principal actor or the actor who makes the most money and maybe shoot them out of their coverage first. Or if you're not going to shoot them completely out of their coverage, certainly for Apple, you'll go to the leading lady, let's say Mary's character is a principal and Dr. Clayton is a supporting actor, right? So you might want to do Mary first, or you might want to do Dr. Clayton first and give Mary a little extra time in the morning to get ready before you start shooting her coverage. These are the types of things, the concerns that the ADs worry about. They discuss those concerns with the director. As a cinematographer, we just say, who do you want to shoot first? Okay, Apple will be Mary's coverage. So the line will squiggle over Dr. Clayton, and it'll be solid over all of Mary's lines of dialogue and squiggled over all of Dr. Clayton's. Okay, the action line is on camera, and Mary's line, and this shot ends right after Mary's line. Yeah, you could say that, okay? So this shot is pretty quick. It goes from the part where Mary squats and gathers her things. Dr. Clayton makes a comment. Mary responds on camera. Dr. Clayton returns to the response. Mary's action and final piece of dialogue within this particular shot ends right after she says, yeah, you could say that. So that whole piece for Apple is just for 2 lines of dialogue for Mary to cut into this master shot. Okay, that's kind of how this whole thing works. We'll do the same thing for Dr. Clayton, the shot right next to this, which would be Baker. So scene 4 Baker is Dr. Clayton, solid line, squiggly over Mary, solid over Dr. Clayton, squiggly over Mary. So this shot is probably Dr. Clayton's single or medium single, right? So we got a master shot, which is loosely in the room, let's say, showing the 2 folks. We get all their dialogue top to bottom in a wide master, and then we start going in for pieces, right? These 2 shots, Apple and Baker, might be 2 clean singles, right? Mediums, which is belt buckle to a couple fingers over the head. One for Mary, one in the opposite direction for Dr. Clayton, but we do those separately and we line them up and we take them separately. And then we just start working our way down the list. Here's a pickup, a shot from another day, which is just a quick shot of this line of action happening here. And then we have Delta, Charlie, and then we have another shot over here that's not marked. It's outside of the margins, so that could be Epsilon or Franklin. We're just going down the sequence of shots that we want to gather for this scene, and you can see that they're smaller and smaller chunks, with the exception of this one over here. This is kind of an interesting piece over here. It's more stuff for Mary. So clearly in these 2 shots, we have probably 2 different sizes on Mary. One of these might be a close-up, and one of these might be a looser single, like a medium single or a really loose single. And then the other series of shots might be a close-up, okay, somewhere in here. We don't know because I don't have any margin notes. I'm just guessing, but that's kind of how this sort of thing works. So if I see 2 different lines here set up to be Mary's coverage, it's probably a tighter and a wider series of shots on her. And then we have 1 set of shots on Doc Clayton, 1 insert on something the doctor's doing here, and then a couple more inserts for the next few sets of lines. Check out the video. Like I said, this will be on web courses for you to look at. It's pretty quick. It's only a couple of minutes, but it explains this process of lining your shots in your script, and it was done by a script supervisor. So if you use this method to break down your scripts into shot lists, you're using the same approach that the script supervisor uses, and the script supervisor's notes are going to the editor. So remember, the script supervisor is on set and present to keep track of continuity, and also to keep track of all the shots that have been taken of all of the coverage for all the scenes, with margin notes and line notes on the script, and all of her stuff that she gathers during principal photography ends up going to the editor as supportive documentation that assists that editor in the assembly of this movie. Okay, so this is a very important part of the process. A lot of it, like I said, can be done in pre-production, pre-visualizing what you want these shots to look like and going through the script scene by scene and breaking it down like so. Okay, framing shots. Now I want to talk to you about the types of shots that we're going to be creating. The building blocks that we need to assemble our scenes with some nice flow and some nice visual sort of continuity, right? So we're talking about extreme long shots, medium long, medium, head and shoulders, close-up, big close-up, extreme close-up, and then we have some other cursory shots, the 2-shot, the 3-shot, the group shot, the medium shot, okay, the medium 2-shot, a split 2-shot sometimes we call it. I'll show you some examples of all of these. But this is the terminology, okay? These are the terms that you should be using. Standard language that you can expect to hear no matter who your director is, no matter who your script supervisor is, and no matter who your editor is, okay? We're all trying to use the same language so that when we communicate on set, we all kind of know what we're talking about. So if the director asks me to set up a close-up, okay, and if we look at the definition of a close-up here, it says a headshot just above the shoulders, okay? This shot is used to provide a more intimate view of a character or show expression. The close-up can also be used as a listening or reaction shot to show the details of an object, response to an object, response to an event, sometimes referred to as a necktie close-up. Okay, so there's several different kinds of close-ups. Okay, I have a jersey on here, but I have a series of buttons. So I just I just tapped my microphone. I have a series of buttons here. Okay. When a director wants a close-up, sometimes you'll say, Mike, can you frame up a 2-button close-up? Okay. You can just imagine if you're wearing a button-down shirt. Okay. My first button is at the neck. The second button down is just above my lavalier, okay? And then there's one button below that. So this button right here would be where the bottom of the frame wants to cut me off. And then 2 or 3 fingers above my head in terms of framing over my head. And that right there is a 2-button close-up. That's the framing for a 2-button close-up. A choker, the bottom of the frame comes up under the chin, and sometimes we even give ourselves what we call a haircut, where the top of the frame will cut inside the hairline and we'll be right in here with a choker or a big close-up, we call this. And then an extreme close-up is generally only the eyes, okay? You get to learn this and you'll get comfortable with this over time, but this is sort of this is the language, this is the lexicon that we use on set when we start to assemble these different parts. What I want to do now is I want to go through a series of frames. For today's lecture, I picked Avengers. So if we have any Marvel or Avengers fans in here, you'll recognize these characters from probably some of your favorite films. But I'm using that as an example to show you basically what this framing will look like. I want to also produce a film with some stand-ins here in the lab and give you a sense of how coverage develops and unfolds on the set. That'll be in a separate video, but for now, for today, I just want to talk to you about the shot types in terms of these sample frames. So the building blocks of our visual language, we're going to start with the extreme long shot, okay, or the ELS, okay. In the ELS, you can see right here, we've got, this is from, I think this is from Avengers. We've got Captain America here, Iron Man's in the middle, and we have Thor on here, frame left, okay. And everything is always described from the camera's point of view. So this is frame left, this is frame right, okay. So Captain America is more than full body frame right. Thor is more than full body frame left. And we got Iron Man bullets right in the middle of the frame, right? And these 3 guys are confronting one another, discussing, sharing information, fighting. I don't know what it is, but the purpose of this shot is fairly clear. We want to see where these characters are. So they're out in the forest somewhere, right? We want to see who's involved. It's these 3 guys right here. And then we're going to hear the basic dialogue for the scene in this wide frame. But really the purpose of this frame is really just to show us where we are, who's involved, and basically what they're talking about. And we want to get out of this size as quickly as possible, unless there's some action that's going to take place that we need to see within this frame, because it's too big demonstrably to be in these close lenses, right? Like if they're going to start kicking and flailing and, you know, fighting with swords, or, you know, whatever it is that they might be doing, we might want to see that in this frame. Okay. Otherwise, we want to get into the tighter work, which is where more of the performance starts to take place. And I think we talked about that last week. So the ELS, where are we and who's involved? The LS, or the long shot, is generally a shot that's going to show a character from head to toe and nothing more, right? So here we go. We've got Sam, he's standing here, and it looks like he's standing right on the bottom of the frame, right? And we just got a couple of fingers over his head for headroom in the frame, and other than that, it's head to toe, and that's it. So of course, this is a cinematic frame, so, and it looks like it's even a DCI frame, so it's not quite anamorphic. But what we're seeing here is, you know, maybe a 40 mil lens. Okay, so we got a bit of information on either side of him, and Sam Jackson, is head to toe in the center of the frame. He's going to talk to us about something, or he's going to reveal something, and we wanted to see his lab, and we wanted to see him in his environment, and then we're going to get out of the shot and get into something tighter. All right, here's a medium long shot, the MLS, okay? Sometimes it's called a cowboy shot, okay? So the term cowboy came from like the era of the Great American Westerns. The cowboy shot, obviously the bottom of the frame line is cropping the character mid-thigh, and mid-thigh was about where the gun belt was on a character in a Western film. So when you cropped that character for a medium long shot, we would include the holster in that compositional framing, and usually the crop ended up right here, mid-thigh. So we call that a cowboy shot. Okay, that's just a medium long shot. The medium shot generally happens at the belt buckle and a couple of fingers above the head for headroom. Okay, and here on Superman you can see that it's cropping him, the bottom of the frame is cropping him at his costume's belt buckle, right? And we've got what it looks like 1 or 2 fingers of headroom above his head and no more. Okay, so you can see the kind of framing that this is setting up now. We can get basic dialogue here. We can start to see body language evolving, and we can hear some lines of dialogue. And as he gets more intense and says things that are more important, we want to start getting in here. Okay, so right now we're in a medium shot on Superman. This is a medium close-up, okay, and it's a medium close-up because it's a lot wider than a 2-button, right? So it's cutting us down here along the along the brazen, as we used to say. Okay, maybe a couple of fingers of headroom, maybe not. You might give him a haircut, but it's certainly wide to the bottom of the frame. Okay, right through or right below the pectoralis. And in this case, it's 2 folks in the frame together, and they're splitting their looks through the center. We call this a 2-shot or a split 2-shot. Okay. Here's your standard 2-button close-up, or in this case, you can see it's right about where the neckerchief is tied in a knot. So we would call that a necktie close-up. Okay. If the Windsor knot or the knot in your handkerchief is appearing right here just below the Adam's apple, we call that a necktie in terms of framing. And in this case, we gave him a little bit of a haircut, so it's not coming through the scalp line, but it's definitely through the coif somewhere. In other words, there's no empty space above his head. Okay, so he's got a haircut and he's cut at the necktie. All right, so that's a necktie close-up. Here is a looser standard close-up. This is the 2-button close-up. In this case, Captain Marvel happens to be wearing a zipper, so, you know, the button analogy is out the window here, but you get the idea, right? This is about where the second button on a dress shirt would start to occur, okay? And notice how in this 2-button close-up, we did crop her along the hairline in the top of frame. Okay, so she has been given a haircut top of frame here, okay? And then here's a big close-up. So the big close-up, like we said, is getting right up under the chin, okay? So this is an objective shot of Iron Man inside of his helmet, and the shot is designed to show you all of the information that he's getting in his visor on the inside of the costume. Okay, so we're in a big close-up here, cropping him right under the chin and right through the forehead. Okay, so we get a frame full of Robert Downey's face and very little of anything else, okay? Here's a big close-up, another form of a big close-up. We're still cropping this fella under the chin. We didn't give him a haircut, but the top of frame is doing what we call sitting right on top of his head. There's no headroom, but there's no haircut either. The frame is sitting right on top of his head, cropped him right under the chin. It's a big close-up, and then there's a hand that's coming into the frame and interacting with our character. So we need enough room for the hand to come in, and then we've got a frame full of face on the left 1/3 line. And then here is a predictable and fairly standard look at an ECU, extreme close-up, and notice again, it's just the eyes. Right? So it's right in here, and there's something about eye performance that the director wants us to see and understand and feel the energy of this shot as opposed to anything wider where this detail right here would be really, really hard for the audience to discern, especially at distance. Okay, so shooting for the edit and gathering coverage. All right, so we've discussed the basic shots, the building blocks of our cinematic language. We talked about the ELS, the LS or the long shot, the MLS or the medium long shot, the medium close-up, the big close-up, and the ECU, okay? But what types of shots are these, okay? The types of coverage, the shot descriptions themselves or the function that they perform are, is it a master shot? Is it a single? Is it a 2-shot? Is it a piece of coverage that comes over the shoulder of one actor onto another? Or is it an insert of some smaller detail within an overall context, like what time is it on my watch, for instance? A shot of just the face of my watch on my wrist would be an insert of the watch face. Okay, if somebody in the shot says, "Hey, what time is it?" and I look at my watch and I say, "Oh, it's 5 minutes to 4," right? And then the camera gets a shot over my shoulder onto my wristwatch in a very tight frame. That's an insert, okay? You've seen these shots time and time again. That's probably something that you sort of take it for granted and you don't even think about it when you see it. But start watching some shows. I don't know if they'll do a lot of inserts on TV. They do them in feature films a lot. They do them on Netflix shows a lot. So if you're watching something on either Netflix or HBO, or maybe you're at the movies, pay attention to how many inserts you see and what the information is that you're being shown in that insert in that very, very tight frame, okay? So a master shot is a recording of the entire dramatized scene, okay, from start to finish, or we also say from top to bottom, from an angle that keeps all the players in view. It's often a long shot or a longer, extreme long shot, and it can sometimes perform a double function as an establishing shot, show us where we are, okay? Usually the master shot is the first shot checked off the list during the shooting of a scene, and it's the foundation for what all of the camera coverage is going to establish. Okay, whatever the actors do in the master, they're going to repeat those actions for each piece of coverage, from the mediums to the close-ups to the big close-ups and the ECUs and inserts. Okay. Historically, the master shot was perhaps the most important shot of any of the shots in a given scene. All the shots in a scene were somehow related to what was happening in the master shot, a tableau, if you will. It was a kind of master shot that could stand alone without any coverage at all. So you guys probably can think of some pretty good examples. the one that comes to my mind almost immediately is Kubrick. He did a lot of scenes that were standalone tableaus, right? One wide shot explaining all the action with enough movement of characters and camera that you got all the information and a sense of what was happening in one tableau master shot. That's what we call a oneer, okay? It's not ideal in this day and age because we expect more compositionally and performatively from our films. Spielberg was really good at expanding the idea of the one shot by moving the camera in a way that you could, start on a close-up and pull out to a wide shot, or start on a wide shot and track along with an actor and then move into a close-up, okay? So that you had the sense of a variety of different framing compositions within one movement master that could then stand on its own, or you could cut into and out of with other pieces of film as needed, okay? So there's a couple of different ways to think about the master, either as the initial setup for a series of shots that will explain a scene, or you might be looking for that tableau. If you're Tarkovsky or Spielberg and you're looking for a way to get all the information in one complex shot with a lot of movement, that's another way to tackle that problem. In terms of physical production, though, the oneer or the tableau shot is going to be one of the most difficult shots to pull off. So if you're going to use that kind of cinematic language, it's going to require a lot of rehearsal and a lot of prior planning so that you have a good sense of what the move is going to be, what it's going to look like, what information it's going to include to minimize the amount of time executing that shot during principal photography, because time is money and you don't want to spend an inordinate amount of time on one piece of film when you might have 3 or 4 scenes to do throughout the entire day. Therefore, you have to be fairly judicious and economical in the way you spend your time. Here's an idea of a master shot. Okay, so this is Bond. I think, is this the beginning of Skyfall? Or Spectre, maybe? Okay, so he's on the roof looking down. Remember, there's this parade happening down here at street level. He's trying to spot the bad guy, right? So he's in a high vantage point looking down at the action, and then there's going to be this confrontation on the rooftops and all this interesting dynamic framing. But this shot here is designed to show us where we are, who's involved, right? We're not necessarily expecting to see Bond in this particular shot, because in the scene prior something happens to him where we get the idea that he may be hurt and laid up for a while. But then no, lo and behold, in the very next scene, the master shot, we establish that he's already out and about and on the job, and it's him, he's there, and he's on the roof. Here's a shot from a recent film by Cuarón. Okay, this is from the film Roma, and this is Alfonso trying to show us his notion of a master shot of a family at dinner all around the dinner table, and this is how he's going to set it up. Okay, so you can see sort of the placement of characters within the frame. We're going to have a character who's going to enter frame and interact with the folks that are already seated. All right, and in the background we see the house and some of the familiar aspects of the house that we've seen in some of the other shots, like the staircase where she was cleaning the floor in the beginning. This is the gated doorway that leads to the garage where she's cleaning up the pet droppings later in the film as well, and where the father parks the car very precariously every day. Okay, so there's all that stuff sort of laid out for you in the background to remind you where you are and who you're dealing with. And then he's arranged everybody around the table for this set of interactions. Okay, shooting for the edit, gathering the coverage, okay? We're looking for masters to establish where we are and who's involved. And then we're going to start getting closer and closer and set up a series of pieces that, when laid next to one another on a timeline, and then as we hit play and we watch the flow, they all kind of make sense. Wider shots to less wide shots to narrower shots and even narrower shots. And then in and out of those sequences of sizes to give us a sense of flow visually, what we're looking for, okay? Part of this process, okay, we shoot in one direction, right? For two characters, let's say, that are, if we talk about Roma, for instance, if I go back to this shot here, so the interaction between the eldest daughter and, say, one of the young men at the table, right? We're going to set up this shot to establish where they are geographically in the frame. Then we might want to come over here and shoot over daughter's shoulder at the people she's talking to. We call that an over the shoulder or an OTS. We do that, okay, and then we have to create another piece of film for the sake of the audience that shows the reverse look, okay, or we call it the reverse. All right, so we're going to shoot her look to the boys, and then we're going to come around over one of the shoulders of one of the boys, and we're going to shoot the reverse. In other words, the action that shows sister and her dialogue from their point of view. So we get both sides of the conversation with each character's over the shoulder shot. Okay, and that's a pretty standard way to cover a conversation. And then you can go in for clean singles, okay, or you can come out for wider shots as the action dictates, okay. So when we're talking about capturing a conversation in a series of reverses or counter shots, okay, this is going to bring up a concept that you've all heard the term of before, but this may be the first time we actually dissect it as a concept and explain what's going on. So I'm talking to you about the directorial line or the director's line or the 180-degree line or the 180-degree rule. You may have heard it in that context. Okay, so if we're setting up a series of shots, we got two people at a table, right? And they're going to be discussing over a laptop, maybe a homework assignment, right? And we're going to start with a master shot. We have a camera placement here, and we're going to look at what we call the two shot, over the laptop onto the two folks talking back and forth about the homework assignment. And then we're going to pick a side, and we're going to start shooting what we call the raking overs. All right, so here's our master shot. We're going to move over here. Our first piece of coverage is going to be looking in this direction, kind of over the laptop and across our blue character onto our red character. And I've got a little piece of movement incorporated into this frame so that the camera will start here and move to what we call a raking angle, right over the blue character and onto the person in red here, okay? And then we have the same counter action or counter shot planned in the opposite direction to do for our character in blue what we just did for our character in red. It's very important when you're gathering coverage for a scene. If you cover a character in a close-up, you should cover the reverse, the other character, in the same style of close-up, so that if the editor wants to cut back and forth between the close-ups, you have both looks, right? The look towards and the look away from the dialogue, right? So for each size, you want to shoot a complementary reverse or a complementary over, okay? And they should be done on the same focal length lens, and they should be done at the same f-stop as well, so that the visual texture of both directions is comparable, okay? So you wouldn't want to shoot a tight shot in one direction with very shallow depth of field on a 100 or a 135, and then shoot the other shot, similar framing, but on a 35 with a totally different viewing angle behind the character. The background is in sharp focus, so the depth of field is different, right? It has a different texture to the framing. Even though they're both basically a head that's this size in the frame, the two different focal lengths will have two different presences, right? The 135 is going to have a fairly narrow field of view, so you're going to see a very limited background, and at wider f-stops, there's going to be very little detail back there. It's going to be a lot of swirly bokeh, out of focus blobs, right, which are very nice because they separate the subject from the background, and you get a nice sharp focus on whoever's in the foreground. The wide angle lens, on the other hand, is going to have a wider angle of view behind the character, and the background will look like it's been pushed away from the lens, whereas the telephoto brings the background right up into the foreground, apparently, right? So you have a difference of what you see behind the character, and it'll be a lot sharper as a result. And that can throw your audience off, okay? So whatever piece of coverage you get in one direction for a given size, you should use the same focal length and f-stop for the reverse so that it has balance visually from shot to shot, back and forth in the edit. The 180-degree rule is based on what we call a proscenium line, okay? And the proscenium line comes from the age of theater, okay? They're forward about 2 or 3 slides. I have a video explanation from the Digital Cinema Society where James Mathers is going to explain the proscenium line to you. But for sake of conversation here, I just want to talk about where this concept comes from. So in theater, before we had television, for instance, or film or movies, what we would do is we would shoot the action from the point of view of the audience. So if we're sitting in the audience down here, represented by camera detail number 1 right here, if the audience is out here, and this is the stage where the play is taking place, then this is backstage and offstage, left and right, right? So the camera represents the point of view of the audience. So if the audience is out here, then there's possibility that the audience could be sitting in a balcony over here and they could see the action from this point of view, or they could be in a balcony over there and see the action from that point of view, represented by these points, frames of reference, okay, over the boy's shoulder onto the girl, over the girl's shoulder onto the boy, right? But as an audience member, we're never going to see the action take place from the point of view of this camera, which is essentially backstage. We're not going to be backstage looking at a play. We're going to be out here in the audience. So this camera angle is jumping over an imaginary line we call the proscenium line. The front of the stage at a theater where all the tow lights are, the limelight, you've heard the term before, that's called the proscenium, okay? And so if we just extend the proscenium from the front of the stage to right through the center of the action with the audience on one side of the proscenium, then the opposite side of the proscenium, there should be no camera angles occurring from back here. If you do that, you have violated the director's rule or the 180-degree rule, okay? And I think that this diagram sort of illustrates that nicely. It's showing you what you're going to see in this frame as you take it from each piece of coverage, and it's showing you the 2-shot from the master position, okay? And then it's showing you an angle that you shouldn't be gathering for the sake of the 180-degree rule. Here's another version of it. It's just in color, so you can get a better sense of what this is. You can see the camera angles as they oppose one another, right? So you can either have this pair of angles and a master from this direction, or this pair of raking angles with a master from that direction, but you shouldn't or can't do both, okay? The only way that you can do both is if the camera starts with the proscenium established in this direction, and then the camera moves in a way that will change the proscenium point of view. Okay, if the camera were to move, let's say the camera were to fly right between these two and pivot around and shoot from the reverse to reveal the audience sitting in the background, at that moment you have changed the proscenium. You've turned it 180 degrees by virtue of a camera move. All right, that's legal, but to set up a camera position with a master on one side of the proscenium and then proceed to get isolated pieces of coverage where you cut the camera and move the camera to another placement and then continue to record, that series of shots all has to stay on the same side of the proscenium, okay, or you have violated the 180-degree rule according to film theory, okay. So I want to invite you to check these videos out from the Digital Film Society in web courses. They are about the 180-degree rule and about taking coverage specifically. And I want to move on from that concept to start talking to you about some other unique aspects of coverage, some specific types of shots. So I used the term singles earlier, okay? Singles are pieces of coverage where you're getting one actor in the frame in a variety of different sizes. It could be a close-up, it could be a medium shot, it could be a cowboy. But if that actor is isolated or alone in the frame, we refer to that as a single, okay? And it's generally thought of as a loose single, being something a little tighter than a medium frame, not as wide. In other words, doesn't go all the way to the belt buckle. Cuts maybe at the belly button or slightly above the belly button, and maybe a little bit of headroom. Anywhere from here to here is a single, okay? And it's usually just one person in the frame, okay? So here's an example of a hero single, okay? It's a hero single because it's taken from a low angle looking up, okay? We talked about that a little bit a week before the break, about how low camera angles that look up are viewing a character in a superior position to the audience. The audience, represented by the camera, is below the eye line looking up. So in this moment of heroic action, the audience is below Cap's eye line looking up at him in a single. This is a heroic single, right? It's a clean single because there's nobody else in the frame with him. There are a number of characters around him. In a master shot, we saw a whole handful of Avengers with him. But in this particular shot, this is all about Captain America's response to what the group is seeing somewhere downfield, okay? Which is like a whole bunch of bad guys converging on them in the middle of town, okay? This is his reaction shot. This is his heroic single. It's kind of also indicative of the Michael Bay single, right? You think of Bad Boys, where you get that sweeping two-shot of Will and Martin, where they both come to the same conclusion at the same time, that it's finally time to kick some ass. And so you get that sort of sweeping heroic two-shot, which is in this sort of framing, but you got two guys in the frame instead of one, okay? That's classic Michael Bay reaction shot. Or it's the turning point, the inciting incident moment of the action, right? Where the characters finally realize that they got work to do. Okay, so talking about the two-shot, we have something that we sometimes refer to as the two-shot, or a split two-shot, depending on how the actors are postured, and I'll show you the difference here in a moment. It's a frame where two actors are seen together going about their performance in proximity to one another in the same frame, okay? So the geography of the actor's placement is sometimes a profile, sometimes not. Sometimes they're looking directly towards the camera. Depends on what they're responding to action-wise, okay? And it's from the camera's point of view. Common use of this shot is to capture conversation at a table, for instance. Imagine the same situation, but with a third party. We'll call that a three-shot at that point. The triumphant or the triumvirate, okay, involving three characters at once. And in this case, that type of shot is usually a reaction shot. It's a group reaction to something that is happening. It's another inciting incident, or it's another turning point that the actors have to sort of confront in the process of resolving their problem, right? In that type of situation, all the characters are going to pick a posture where they're going to turn, and they're going to be looking towards camera, but past the camera at something in the world that's coming this way, and we are in the middle of that action as the audience, looking at their response shot. Okay, so here's a two-shot. All right, this is a medium two-shot. I used to call this the 7-10 split. If you're a bowler, you'll understand the reference, right? The 7-pin and the 10-pin. Right, you knock down all the other 8 pins, but you got the 2 standing in the wings, and you got to pick which one you're going to pick up for your spare. But you can't necessarily get both. That's where the 7-10 split nickname came from. Okay, and it's just a two-shot. There's both characters are in the frame at the same time. Their look lines are actually in the same point of view, same direction, off camera right at somebody over here talking to them. On the other hand, here's a split two. Okay, so here's Bane and Batman, and they're about to go at it, right? They're both in the same frame. He's on the left 1/3, he's on the right 1/3. The real estate between them is the gulf that they have to cross to get access to one another. and they're in direct confrontation. They're turned profile to the camera. This is a fairly classic two-shot, the split two we call it. And this is one possible way that we might compose that frame. Here's another type of a two-shot, and this is a little bit different. Okay, if you can wrap your head around this, this is a two-shot of, what's her name in this movie? Clarice, right? So Jodie Foster is talking to Anthony Hopkins. Okay, he's behind the Lexan wall of his cell. All right, so he should technically be over our shoulder, and we should be looking at her, looking over our shoulder at Anthony Hopkins. But because his reflection is in the frame with her point of view, we see Anthony Hopkins as a two-shot with Jodie Foster, and it's a close-up. So this is an interesting way of thinking outside the box, right? Instead of setting it up the traditional way, where we look at Clarice throwing her looks over shoulder through the Lexan, and then we turn around and we look at Anthony Hopkins throwing his look in the opposite direction, mirror reflected image, right? And then just cut between those two pieces, we could have them essentially talking to one another. But in this shot, it's more interesting to visually have him as a reflection and her as the reality. So we can set up not only are we establishing the dialogue between the two and showing them interact, but we're also creating some kind of visual metaphor here. So it could be anything from, you know, Clarice is following a copycat killer. So in essence, the ghost of Lecter is present every time Buffalo Bill commits an act of murder, and so we see him as a reflection. Maybe that's one possible interpretation. There could be a variety of interpretations. That's really up to you to decide, but this is a fun way to do the two-shot because we got everybody in the frame at the same time when geographically they're each standing on the opposite side of a piece of Lexan. Okay? Here's a three-shot. This one's from Reservoir Dogs. And this is, they open up the trunk and there's a guy tied up in the trunk, right? And so this is their reaction to opening the trunk. So there's a reveal, right? The camera starts in a black box. The trunk opens and reveals this three-shot. So this is another interesting way to evolve into a three-shot using not camera movement at this point, but something dynamically moves in the frame vis-a-vis the trunk lid, opens up to reveal the world in a three-shot of these three characters. Okay, the over-the-shoulder shot, I've talked about it a couple of times already today, and now I want to start showing you some examples of what that might look like. Okay, so here's a shot over the shoulder. Okay, so we got Paul Bettany is this character frame right. Okay, and then this is one of the Olsen sisters. Okay, and she's looking at Paul, and so this piece is about her close-up, but we're doing it over Paul's shoulder so that we can see her eye line as she looks at him and all the emotion that's happening, and we know it's for him, right? And the camera is not going to be subjective. In other words, she's not reacting to us, the audience. She's reacting to Paul. But we want to get our point of view as close to Paul's point of view as possible so we can see the power of her performance as she looks into his eyes. And then the reverse of this is a little bit wider and a little bit looser, right? So it's a little where we're really up on his shoulder here. When it comes to going over her shoulder, we're quite a bit away and off axis from her shoulder. His look line is a little wider than hers was. So she's looking closer to the lens here, and he's looking wider from the lens here, okay? Now, it could have been because the director wanted to see some of the background happening here. It could be because there is some wider action that this shot is going to evolve into, right? So the camera might pull back from this OTS and reveal a wider frame and let Paul exit the frame, for instance. That would be one reason why. So pull out and Paul exits frame. That would be one reason to be slightly wider. Sometimes actors find it very intimidating to have a lens right over an actor's shoulder shooting their single, right? And they just can't they can't compartmentalize their performance, which needs to be in regard to this character, with the lens so close to the eye line. And so we'll move the lens further out of frame and create a little space so that the actor has a cleaner line, a cleaner eye line towards the character, and can deliver their dialogue a little bit more purposefully without the distraction of a camera lens. Okay, so there's a number of reasons why this might be a slightly wider axis shot, and I don't know specifically because I don't know what was in the director's mind at the time that they took this piece of film. So we can only speculate at this point. Here's another, this is what we call a dirty single. So here's Captain America in the frame here, and he is dealing with this individual. We know who this guy is, but we want to show his proximity here. He's dominating Captain America in this shot for some reason, and we're seeing over his elbow onto Captain America. Instead of being over the shoulder, this is a different way to have this character's presence within the frame, but not have it distractive to the point where we're dividing our attention between his foreground presence and Captain America. We want to see Captain America's performance here in the single, in the loose, really loose single. It's a medium single, but we want this character in the frame as a reference. Okay. This is a video about reaction shots. Remember, I was talking to you about gathering coverage. You do one angle on one character, you have to do the reverse on the other character, or you do a single on a character like Captain America's hero single. Well, now we got to show what he's looking at, right? So we see Captain looking at something and reacting, and then we must see what he sees, right? So it's two shots, one owes the other, right? If you do his single reacting, you must show what he reacts to. Okay, so you have to turn around and get that. So this video is going to talk about that concept, and you can load it up out of web courses and check it out at your leisure. Here too is a discussion about the insert. Okay, and I talked about the insert. The insert is designed to show us a detail, a piece of information or a detail from a much wider point of view, a much wider shot. And so the director is going to take the time to show you exactly what that piece of information is, because it's critical to the story and it's critical to the audience's understanding of what's going on. Okay, and a lot of times it could be the watch, right? And in this case, this is from the movie Zodiac, and it was really important because it wasn't about the time of day. This shot was when Robert Downey, Jake Gyllenhaal, and the cops working on the case determined that the symbol that's been on the murderer's murder notes that he's been leaving behind with his victims is the same symbol that's on the Zodiac brand watch. Okay, and so this was a breakthrough in the case. So the director wants you to see that detail. We've been seeing the notes from the killer pinned to the articles of clothing of the victims. I did it again. So we've seen the notes left with the victims in the Zodiac film, and we see the killer's signature, and he gives us the circle with the cross, right? And at this moment in the film, they realize that he got that idea from, he's wearing a Zodiac watch. So the concept was they might be able to catch this guy if they can figure out when and where he bought the watch, right? So it becomes a clue in the movie that the director wants you to know, because you're assembling all of these clues to try and figure out who the Zodiac killer is. Excuse me. Here's another kind of an insert. This is from Star Wars. So this is when our hero finally decides how to harness the Force, right? You remember how Luke was raising stones in the, what was that, the Empire Strikes Back, where he goes to train under Yoda, and he's lifting the stones and standing and doing a handstand. Okay, So she's doing the same thing here, but she's learning how, on a broader scale, how to affect the force all around her. And so we have a similar kind of reference shot, but this is little tiny pebbles and things all around her as Ray is summoning the force, right? Instead of showing the same kind of shot of the rocks in larger size being lifted, they did that in the other movie. This is a fresh take on the same kind of idea, but it's now with the smaller stones that are all littering the ground around where she's standing. Okay, the POV shot, the point of view shot, okay? First person shot, or the subjective camera angle, it's a brief image that shows what our character is looking at, right? So Captain America sees danger, and then the camera turns around and shoots the danger, right? It's the POV. What does our character see? So it's an angle that looks away from our character. It's a subjective point of view, right? And it is the reaction shot, the bad guys, right? Reaction, the bad guys, okay? There's also other kinds of points of view shots, okay? So here's a point of view shot from, what's this one? This is not, is this Train Spotting? Or is this, this is the Debbie film, the Benoit Debbie, the Enter the Void, I believe, where the character has been shot, and the whole movie is a point of view movie, right? So this guy has just taken a boatload of DMT, right? And he's tripping balls, and he leaves his apartment and he goes to his favorite club called The Void, and he's going to conduct a drug deal, I think. The person that he's going to sell to has squealed on him and informed the cops, and the cops come to arrest this guy for dealing narcotics. He runs in the bathroom and they shoot him through the door, and we see what he sees when he realizes he's been shot and he's bleeding out pretty hard, okay? And this is his POV of his own hands with his own blood on them, and he realizes he's been shot. And he's tripping, so he's like, wow, am I really shot, or is this part of my trip? Here is Hardcore Henry, and this is the same kind of idea, right? This whole movie was done from the point of view of Henry, and Henry is going through this film, creating all this mayhem and violence and so forth, and we see the whole movie from his point of view. We see what he sees through the whole movie as he's conducting these exciting and dangerous stunts, right? So it's kind of an interesting sort of take on the POV film. Here's another kind of a POV. This is an objective POV. So the previous couple that I showed you were subjective POVs. We're seeing what the character sees, right? In this objective POV, this is from the King's Speech, right? So we have the people of London standing all around the fountain, right? This is outside of, I think this is Buckingham Palace, right? And so we have Colin Firth, who's playing the king. He's giving a speech on the balcony, and the whole gist of the movie was he was this stuttering second or third in line of succession royal, and through luck of the draw and having a brother abstain from the throne, Colin ends up being the next in succession to ascend the throne, and he's got this wicked stuttering problem. And so the whole movie, he's going to therapy with Jeffrey Rush, who's posing as a speech therapist, and he's learning how to conquer his fear of talking to groups of people, right? So his whole phobia is public speaking, right? And so Jeffrey Rush has taught him how to visualize his audience in a humorous fashion, which will relieve his tension and anxiety and allow him to speak without stuttering. And in this scene, he delivers a public speech, and this is like the denouement. This is the successful wrapping up of this whole story of his struggle. And we see what he is facing in his foreground, but we see him and his family at the same time. So we're outside of his point of view, and we're objectively seeing what he sees over his shoulder. So that's the other kind of point of view shot that you can achieve. And then, of course, there's the odd angles, right? So here's a series that's going to air. I think this is going to air on Showtime, I think, or Stars. And they're taking the shot from the bird's eye view, looking straight down at the top of the desk, okay? And it's the kind of shot compositionally that they're going to repeat time and time again throughout the series. And so it has meaning. It's the God's point of view look at this person's life and how the events are unfolding. And we're going to see that in a variety of different films. So here's how they approach it in this film. Here is the same approach from The Walking Dead. This is from the pilot of The Walking Dead, right? This is when the sheriff opens his eyes for the first time. And he doesn't know that the world is populated now with zombies and everybody's dead, right? So he just wakes up in the hospital. And because our framing doesn't go off the pillow, we're restricted into finding out what the state of the world is as he finds out. So he's going to sit up, and we're going to then take an over-the-shoulder posture with him, and we're going to follow him through the hospital as he starts looking for doctors and nurses and anybody that can help him. He's just woken up, and he's all disoriented, and he's trying to figure out what's going on and where everybody is. And he's figuring out, as he walks through the hospital, that something's not right. And we're finding out at the same time he's finding out. So it's a different kind of a POV in that it's revealing things to the audience at the same time the hero is discovering these same facts and features, okay? But we're seeing an objective point of view of the sheriff, right? From eyes open to sit up to over the shoulder, walking down the hallway, and all the other rooms are empty in the hospital. This is a film about the Dutch angle, and you can look at that on web courses as well. It's kind of a fun little animated short. It's about 8 or 9 minutes long, and it'll talk to you about the history of the Dutch angle. I got some examples here for you. This one is, so this is Tom Cruise, and I think this is from A Few Good Men, I think, where he's about to go in and confront Nicholson in the big courtroom showdown, right? And he's figured out that it's all ego, and he's got to draw this guy into the trap of admitting that he ordered the code red on the corporal who was murdered. And Cruise this is a pivotal point for him. So we're seeing him in a compromised angle, or a Dutch angle. It's a signal to the audience that this is an intense moment where he's not in his normal frame of mind. He's not crazy, he's intense, right? And so that's the extent that we have canted the frame is a signal to the audience that he's that much bent out of shape about this, and there's a big moment coming, okay? Here's another angle. So this is the sheriff. This is Roy from Jaws. Again, right? What's going on? He's complaining that they've been out there for hours and hours and hours, and why does Richard Dreyfuss get to drive the boat, and why is Quint such a cranky, bossy jerk? And he's lighting up a cigarette, and he's kind of chumming the water. He's throwing the blood and the guts in the water, and he's going, I don't know. And then the shark raises up out of the water and reveals itself just to Roy. The other two guys are jerking off in the background, and Roy sees the shark come up out of the water, and the camera goes whoop, and he goes, oh, we're going to need a bigger boat, right? Or he goes, oh my God, and then the next shot he walks into the pilot house and tells Quint we're going to need a bigger boat. So this is his moment of realization. Oh my God, the shark is bigger than I thought he was, right? Emphasis. Here it is again. This is, what is this? This is Bruce Willis, and this is, oh God, I'm drawing a blank now. Okay, he's in the building, the bank building, and he finally meets Hans Gruber, right? And they finally meet for the first time. Up until this point in the movie, Hans has been a voice at the other end of the walkie-talkie as Bruce Willis is trying to uh, subdue these guys and bring them in. And likewise, up to this point, from Han's point of view, Bruce Willis has been a confounding pain in his plan, and equally an anonymous voice on the other end of a radio. Okay, and then at this moment in time, they finally meet in person, face to face, and so the angle is slightly Dutched to give us an idea that this is a special moment that's not normal, right? And lastly, we have this interesting angle. This is from Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, which is a takeoff on the movie that Brad Pitt did as a follow-up a couple of years later. This guy here has robbed a pawn shop, and he has ended up with an artifact and some cash that belongs to Dennis Farina. And Dennis has flown over from the U.S. to the U.K., where this guy has committed the robbery, and he's hired this local hitman to find and capture this guy and get his stuff back, right? And so in this moment, when they finally catch up with the guy who committed the robbery, and they throw him down on the top, I guess it's the top of the desk or whatever, we're looking up at the hitman and his big Desert Eagle 50 caliber 44 Magnum, I think it is, Desert Eagle that he's using, pointing it right at his temple, and Dennis Farina is going to, in his very relaxed sort of casual voice, is going to say, where's my money? All right. So it's kind of a twist on the action. Instead of it being really intense and kinetic, instead it's this kind of interesting sort of up angle to create some emphasis and some comedy, right? It's a comedic moment where this guy has some really sort of funny reciprocal dialogue that he's going to be throwing back and forth with Farina. And so they have this sort of humorous little moment where he's in real danger, but they're still going to trade this sort of campy dialogue. And then lastly, we have a POV shot of Christian Bale, and this is from, I believe this is from American Psycho. And so Christian Bale has this alter ego in the movie, right? So he's businessman by day and psychotic killer by night, I guess. And so we're never quite sure what state of mind he's in until he kind of comes at somebody and bludgeons them to death, and it's a very bloody film, and is making a socio-political statement relevant to the the late 80s, early 90s. In this particular shot, though, we're seeing Christian as a silhouette, right? So the silhouette has a lot of emotional, psychological meaning for us as an audience. So we see the profile, we understand, we know who it is, we recognize the profile. It's clearly Christian Bale. But are we looking at Christian Bale, the narcissistic executive, or are we looking at Christian Bale, the psychotic killer, and we keep him as a profile silhouette to prolong that sort of moment of questioning on the part of the audience, where the audience is deciding who this guy is and who they're going to see. And so he's sort of revealing he has a dark side to his character, right? And he's selecting his outfit for his next inciting incident, his next victim, whatever you want to call it. And so we see him not as the Christian Bale character by day, but rather we see him as the alter ego. Okay, we talked about this a little bit when we looked at the examples from Mr. Robot. Same kind of thing, but a little less sophisticated, a little bit more stereotypical approach. The silhouette is a fairly well-known and well-used trope in the cinematic lexicon. It's been around for a long time. Everybody, as an audience, we all kind of understand on a visceral level what the silhouette is meaning, even if we haven't been educated or instructed as to what its clear intent or meaning is. We all kind of get it when we see the silhouette. We understand that it means something dark and all deviant or subcultural in some way. And so there's going to be a couple of videos here at the end that are talking about a couple of different concepts. This concept is the idea of blocking the scene. So in the beginning of the day, the director, the cinematographer, the key grip, the gaffer, department heads, in other words, that are working principal photography, they're all going to gather and watch the actors do what we call a stop and go rehearsal. They're going to run their lines of dialogue in the set, maybe with their wardrobe and makeup on, or maybe prior to being put through the works for the day. And this is where the actors are going to kind of meet in the real location that's been decorated for the first time with the camera and the director and everybody. And they're going to kind of figure out how they're going to do the dance. And we all stand and we watch them do their dance, and we make notes of where they pause for dialogue and where they move and how they interact when they're doing this whole thing. And we put marks on the floor, and we take focus measurements, and we set lighting appropriately for those spots or those points of key. And then we bring them in for a final rehearsal, and we make tweaks on all of our lighting and camera positions and so forth to make sure that everybody knows what's going to happen. And then we start shooting the scene and creating the takes. Okay, so this video is about that process of blocking, and you can access it on web courses. This and the following video are what I call putting it all together. Okay, so this is a shot from, this one I think is Silverado. And it's the gunfight scene at the end where Kevin Kline is confronting the bad Sheriff Cobb in the town at the end of the movie. And it's showing you the arrangement of shots that went into the final assembly of the gunfight. And the next clip is similar. It's from The Quick and the Dead, and it's Russell Crowe and Cheryl Stone play two gunfighters that have to confront each other in a macabre competition amongst a whole handful of gunfighters that have been collected through the American Southwest to meet on a particular day to have a tournament to see who the fastest gun in the West is. And so at one point, Sharon Stone and Russell Crowe, who have prior history before this movie timeline begins, they end up on opposite ends of the gunfight proscenium, right? And only one of them is going to survive this confrontation. Who's it going to be, right? And so it's a whole series of shots to put together the timing and the anxiety and the building of the suspense and the action as the clock ticks to high noon, and then they're supposed to draw their guns and shoot, and whoever has the better aim and the quicker hand is ostensibly the winner, because the other character is shot dead in the street. And so this is a way of showing you how the assembly can work, the types of shots that were used, and how those shots build as a sequence towards a culminating final resolution, right? And so whether it's Silverado or The Quick and the Dead, you're going to see from a couple of different filmmakers what their idea of the classic gunfight looks like, right? And then this final clip here, this is about the collaborative masterpiece. This is a clip from No Country for Old Men. I believe it's the coin toss, right? So it's the scene where we have the old gas station attendant out in the middle of the dusty nowhere somewhere in, I guess, Texas or Arizona. And we have Javier Bardem comes into the gas station as the assassin, right? And he has this sort of random sense of justice, right? He's just filled up his tank. He's had a couple of pistachios or something. He's on the trail of the money that he is tracking down which was sort of discovered and absconded with by Brolin, James, actor Brolin, right, has found the money, and he is making his way out of the country to go and hide somewhere and hide the money, and Javier is hot on his trail. But in the process of doing this, right, as a random consequence of coming into direct interaction with this gas station attendant, Javier has to decide whether or not to kill him or pay for his gas and keep going. And so he flips a quarter on the counter, and we have this exchange between these two guys. And it's a metaphorical exchange. It's an existential conversation between death and the unwitting participant of the competition, right? The gas station attendant. The gas station attendant, his life is on the line, but he doesn't really understand that. And the whole point is, and the point that Javier is making in this scene is that, fate and death and universal justice can come upon you at any moment in your life. And in those moments, are you present? Do you understand what's happening to you? Are you accountable for how you have lived? Or are you oblivious, right? And so the flip of the coin is as random for Bardem as the harbinger of doom as it is for this unwitting gas station attendant who doesn't even know that he's about to die if it's tails and not heads. Right, and so the directors are putting together, this Joel and Ethan Coen, they're putting together a series of shots that lead you closer and closer and closer to these two guys interacting and building the tension and showing you visually, helping you visually as an audience get your adrenaline, your cackles up about what's about to happen. Is he going to get shot or is he going to let him live? We don't know. It's evolving in front of us before our eyes. Pretty exciting stuff. And then I have a quick video for you to look at. It's on the One Take Master. Okay, and this is just about how you can look for opportunities to cover an entire scene through effective and complex camera movement. In essence, gaining the effect of having a variety of different shot sizes simply by moving in for a close-up and then moving back out again for a wide shot, and incorporating camera moves and selective framing into a oneer that gives you a tableau shot where you don't have to cut it up with editing. And here's another example called the Spielberg oneer. This is from the guy who produces the website Every Frame is a Painting. There is a little bit of profanity in his dissertation, so I want you to just be aware of that if you have sensitive ears or if you're offended by that type of thing. He does at a couple of points in the video use some expletives, so they're in there. If you're sensitive to that kind of thing, like I said, you can probably bypass this video and get what you need understanding wise out of this one, but this is pretty interesting if you can look past some of the foul language at how Steven Spielberg specifically approaches the complex problem of the oneer. Okay, so that's what I have for you today. I appreciate your time. I want to just make you aware of your homework assignment. That's reading. Okay, I mentioned it in the beginning. Writing with Motion and Coverage and Continuity from the Blue-Brown book. Okay, check out those chapters. Also review the material that we went over prior to the break, and your next quiz will be comprised of that information. Okay, so I thank you very much. I apologize for the odd reception coming back from spring break. I know that we didn't expect to have a coronavirus in the midst of our return to school, but we'll get through this together. Look towards web courses for additional lectures, and be sure to tune in. I'm going to leave the lecture up all week, so you'll be able to access it at your leisure as often, as many times as you want. And email me if you have questions about any of the concepts, and we'll cover it maybe in a phone conversation or in a series of emails to make sure that you can reach the understanding that you need in order to take your quizzes. Okay, So that's all I have for you today. Thanks for tuning in. Next week, we'll begin our discussion in earnest about camera movement. And so we'll have some demonstration videos and some lecture to go along with those concepts. And then hopefully we'll be back together again in 3 weeks in class. But if not, this will be the format moving forward. I hope that you're comfortable with it. And give me the heads up if any of you are challenged by or do not have effective access to the internet moving forward, so we can get your access solved between now and the end of the semester. All right, thanks so much. Have a good afternoon, and I'll see you all next week. Thanks so much.